At the White House, we know President Trump's personal assistant resigned last night. Who is she, and what do we know about the circumstances surrounding her departure?
Yeah, so that's something that I talk about in my book, and I ask, a lot of questions of how did the information that I said at that off the record get back to the president and ultimately make national headlines.
There's going to be bumps in the road. We're all human, and for a long time I thought that this one night was going to define me. And then
The truth is finally out. At 34 years old, Donald Trump's former assistant, Madeleine Westerhout, finally broke her silence on the president, debunking and confirming some of the meanest rumors that have haunted the president for a long time. What happens when an old gatekeeper to some of the secrets of the most powerful man in the world decides to speak up? I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again. How damning could the consequences of her actions be? Join us as we discuss Westerhout's decision to spill the secret juices of the most controversial man in the world, Madeleine Westerhout. Inside Trump's inner circle. If there was ever a woman who knew the real Donald Trump and everything he stands for, his secrets, his frustrations, the little time when he swears at the copying machine in the Oval Office, it was definitely Madeleine Westerhout. Born in Newport Beach, California, she grew up with one dream firmly rooted in her heart, making it to Washington, D.C., and being in the crunch of American political discourse. Equipped with her dreams and a will to succeed, she made her way to the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina, receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science in 2013, leaving her comfort zone in California behind in exchange for a path that leads only to the White House, the domain of American politics. While she prepared for a stable job in the White House, she acclimatized to the political landscape as fast as she could, ranging from working as a campaign manager for Mitt Romney in 2012 to working on the campaign team of a Republican candidate called John R. in 2013. Her exploits in this campaign drew the attention of Congressman John Campbell, a Republican politician with serious sway in the Republican National Committee, popularly called the RNC. Westerhout, as expected, was beyond impressive while she was working for the congressman, who then recommended her for a position in the Republican National Committee and the Republican Party Organizing Committee. By 2015, she had worked her way up to being an assistant to the Republican National Committee's Chief of Staff, Katie Walsh. Owing to her surreal influence behind the scenes on the smooth operation of the Republican National Committee, she moved further up the ladder. With a few handshakes and introductions to the right people backed up by her skill, she was offered the job that she had always wanted, the role of a special assistant to President Donald Trump as he took office for the first time in the White House on January 20, 2017. For most people who were on the outside looking in, employing a 27-year-old, regardless of her experience in politics, as a special assistant to a president who had never served in any political office or even in the military, was a red flag. However, Donald Trump has never been one to dwell on outside noise. He wanted Madeleine, who was selected with the help of his team, and wanted her in the West Wing of the White House with him. But just how expansive was her relationship with him? The Pope is being told that Donald Trump is not a nice person. Okay, Donald Trump is a very nice person. For a religious leader to question a person's faith is disgraceful. The magical duo that rocked the White House. As the special assistant to the president, Madeleine's influence within the White House grew by leaps and bounds. With the regular hounds waiting for her epic fall, she was standing tall, marking her territory in the White House, and setting the standard so high that no one else could touch her level. While she was exceptional at her job, other parts of her presence in the White House sparked even more debate, namely her dynamic relationship with President Donald Trump. The president often referred to her as my beauty, signaling just how close the pair had become. She handled his emails, checked his tweets, trying to keep the controversy to a minimum level, and was just an earshot away from every conversation, whether political or just another one of his social discussions, which could involve an escapade with some hidden mistress or some behind-closed-doors party. Owing to her effectiveness in the West Wing and her close relationship with the president, which obviously came with a special assistant office, she became a target of every news media outlet out there, looking to get some juicy secrets about the president. Who wouldn't like exclusive news from someone often within earshot of the Oval Office? However, she was too smart to be schooled by the media's antics. She chewed them and spat them out for breakfast, aligning the president's glorious speeches before he dished them out from a teleprompter behind the resolute desk and making sure that he is never caught lacking. Trump watched carefully as she was performing beyond expectations and working harder than almost anyone else. So he chose to reward her, promoting her to Director of Oval Office Operations on February 2, 2019, the same year she was turning 29, paired with a salary package of $145,000 annually. The duo worked in tandem behind the scenes, granting her even more access to the Oval Room and by extension, the president. As expected, her relationship with the president created a lot of extended discourse around the truth behind their relationship. However, Madeleine was too smart to let rumors like that fester. She arranged his schedule, sorted out his emails, and edited his speech, keeping the administration functioning while steering clear of the cameras and the unwanted attention that came with her position. She did not try to make a headline or create a brand for herself. Instead, she stuck to the same concept that brought her that far: loyalty. However, in August 2019, the unthinkable happened. News emanated from the White House that Madeleine had been fired. No one saw it coming. Madeleine, who used to be the brain behind sorting the president's super-tight schedule and making running the United States as light work, suddenly found herself locked out of the same building that she used to run, chewed and spat out by the unforgiving system. Madeleine Westerhout abruptly resigned from the White House in August 2019 after coming under scrutiny for sharing intimate details about the president's family with the press. As expected, opposition parties were already on about promoting her too early, and how much of a mistake it was to trust a woman that young with such power and responsibility. But what could have made the president turn so quickly on a woman he once revered so highly? Loyalty turns toxic. There is an obvious burden that comes with working with the most powerful and controversial man in the world. And no one knew that more than Madeleine, who had been under scrutiny since she stepped foot into the White House. Not because she was incompetent, but because there were some who used her appointment to usher in a political agenda that reflects the Trump administration in a bad light. Although she had been following her intuition, trusting her guts enough to stay loyal to a man who brought her in, promoted her in 2 years, and did not care what anyone had to say, but only focused on her performance and rewarded her accordingly. She had times when she needed to cool off and take a break from being an aide to the most powerful man in the world for a while. While she might have meant neither harm nor disrespect to the president or his family, a woman who knows too much about the president of the United States getting drunk at a dinner party was most definitely a recipe for disaster. Although she might have learned ways to keep her excitement about being a special assistant to the president of the United States, pretending like it is just another Tuesday and to know deep things about the most powerful man in the world, she probably only practiced while she was sober. Loose lips sink ships, or so they say, and it only took a good bottle of red to nudge her into talking her head off. While she was still at the dinner with the Deputy White House Press Secretary, Hogan Gidley at the time, she spoke to reporters while drunk about Donald Trump. "I definitely had too much to drink, and I said some things that I didn't mean and that I know not to be true. And so, at the end of the day, I take responsibility." All they had to do was ask her to comment on the president, and the liquid courage in her loosened her lips, telling tattered tales of Donald Trump's family. First, she put it out there to the reporters that she had some really intimate relationship with the president and his family, especially his kids. Silent, solid tension filled the room, and it was so tangible you could cut it with a knife. However, she broke the silence with a drunken laugh, trying hard to hold it together before she finally spilled the tea. She described herself to be closer to the president than his kids were to him, claiming that Donald Trump could not pick his daughter Tiffany Trump out of a crowd, claiming that he was just that distant from her. Additionally, she added that Trump has always carefully avoided the opportunity to take a picture with Tiffany because she is fat. That was enough to send the wolves to the door of the president, trying hard to rip his image, an image that she helped build with her service to the Trump administration during his first stint as president. However, the real question is, why did she do it? And how did Donald Trump react to it? The president fires Madeleine. Following Madeleine's drunken explosion in what she believed to be an off-the-record sweep, she hoped that the information that she had spilled that night was going to insulate her from any potential backlash. However, that wasn't the case. The restaurant inside the embassy suite was obviously not off the record as she thought, and she knew that she was about to face some really grievous consequences. While she was considering a possible suspension for a couple of months, she was hit with a sack letter. Although she felt the pain and the jubilant moves from those who had already deemed her incompetent for the job before she could even prove herself, she kept her cool, apologized, and hoped for her job back. But that ship had sailed, and there was no coming back. However, as the situation unfolded, Madeleine wondered why she was fired with reckless abandon without any consideration for what she had done in the past for the United States and Donald Trump. When the president was interviewed about the situation, he believed that she had made wrong decisions, especially because she thought that she had the whole room in control like she used to run things in the White House. The president could tell that she uttered those words because she had been lulled into a sense of security, forcing her to spill her mind about anything at all. Although the president was angry, and rightfully so, with his family being mentioned in an inflammatory manner like that, he was more than happy to forgive her, but not to retain her. However, President Trump held his beliefs firmly about her being a real person. He believed that her mistake was as rookie as they get. But to make sure that his daughters and family were safe from her, he announced that she had finally agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement. According to insiders, she was so disappointed that she decided to make silence her greatest investment and companion. For many years after she was fired, Madeleine decided to make silence her greatest friend, keeping herself away from the media and almost just disappearing into thin air. However, hell hath no fury like a scorned woman, and Madeleine was definitely scorned. She had chased this dream of being in the highest echelon of politics all across the United States, going from United. She was hush-hush on everything, staying silent and slowly fading into the crown. While some posited that she was ashamed of the action, well, she isn't. Her silence was deafening as she removed herself from the public eye, planning revenge against the system that used her and threw her out over a mistake. How has she responded to this perceived injustice? Watching from the sidelines. Following Madeleine's departure from the White House, she watched the movements in the White House throughout the tenure of the man who let her get fed to the wolves. Even after she apologized, however, in politics, apologies just don't cut it, as optics matter more than friendship. And she knew this too. She noticed that the operations moved smoothly on the outside, but she had heard news of something darker through her old friends who still work in the building. Although she had physically detached herself from the White House, some of the speech routines and the way his tweets are worded remained almost the same. She was watching a well-oiled machine that she helped build turn into an element for shoddiness. Shadiness that she never allowed when she ran the day-to-day of the Oval Office from reality TV to the top of the GOP. Donald Trump has been in the spotlight for decades. What do we know about his past that gives hints to where he wants to lead the country in the future? As an outsider looking in, her vantage point had changed. She had stepped away from the chessboard and could now see how the game was being played from all angles, watching all the pieces move to churn out different narratives to distract the citizens of the United States while they kept the ball rolling in the White House without any form of suspicion. If anyone could have known the truth about Donald Trump's private life and how he often blended his private life with his duty at the Oval Office, of course, it was the one personal assistant whom he held in the highest esteem and promoted within 2 years of her duty, Madeleine. Madeleine knew secrets about the inner workings of the White House and understood the president more than most people, as she had worked closely with him long enough and even gotten to see his personal life. A side most people only see through the intimidating view of Trump Tower and his residence in Mar-a-Lago. While Trump's time in the office continued, she saw him getting tied to the Jeffrey Epstein case, the same man who was convicted of trafficking and hosting wild parties almost reminiscent of Diddy's. And he allegedly featured a lot of powerful men in the world in these parties, which allegedly included the president. Although the president had already cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein before his 2019 arrest, some of his old quotes from 2002 came back to haunt him. In his interview with the New York Magazine in 2022, when he was mainly just a rich socialite in the United States who loved to party as hard as he worked, he spoke really highly of Jeffrey Epstein. "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." The quote was a magic bullet for most journalists to easily target the president and tie him directly to the Epstein case following his arrest in 2019. Madeleine watched as new headlines started to surface on the internet, distracting the people from discussing the Epstein files, and also watched as Mar-a-Lago was being raided in 2021 upon suspicion of the president keeping highly classified files in his private residence. While watching from the comfort of her house, she knew the truth, and she knew and could tell that it was being distorted. What more would it take to make Madeleine step out of the shadows as an observer and finally let everyone know the truth about Donald Trump? The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States. The last straw. While she had been watching the White House unravel that she helped build under the Trump administration, using her tactics to fend off the wolves at the door for 2 more years until the end of Donald Trump's first stint as president, she still kept her silence and stayed invisible from the media, keeping to herself and stepping away from the spotlights. She had been silenced once in 2019 following her inability to keep her mouth shut. Hence, people close to her reveal that she has since preferred to keep her cards close to her vest, staying away from anything that might drag her back into the unforgiving world of politics, where everyone is a friend and everyone is an enemy. However, watching Donald Trump getting grilled in court on April 14, 2024 about the hush money case set some fire in her belly. Although the plan had been to step far away from everything that concerned the White House and Donald Trump, she knew too much to stay on the sidelines. Remember how she had just been at an earshot distance away from the Oval Room where he took most of his calls on a secure line, and asked her to let no one in, including his chief of staff at the time, until he was done with those calls? Yes, she had information. She knew things that no one else could tell. But after being silenced once and cast out of the White House and the political pool by extension, she needed to make a big appearance, turn the tables around, and step out of the shadows to give herself a chance at being reckoned with again in the political landscape of America. But who would want a former personal assistant to the most important person in the world who could not keep her mouth shut, spilling secrets after a couple of drinks? Trump's hush money case was starting to heat up as he was accused of covering up a $130,000 payment to an adult film star, Stormy Daniels, on business records. Trump allegedly had his former fixer, Michael Cohen, pay Daniels, while Trump reimbursed Cohen in 2017 and reported the reimbursement as legal fees. Basically, he was accused of cooking his books. As the case raged on, the 34-year-old Madeleine at the time was trying to hold onto her hat so badly, trying to avoid the case. However, it wasn't long before she found her way to the courtroom, willingly taking up the stand and telling everything she knew to the world. How important was her contribution to the case? Madeleine breaks her silence. Having tried to stay away from Donald Trump, politics, and the White House, she just never really got over the high of being in political spaces, controlling the narratives behind the scenes and affecting what is written as news to the public. Hence, it was almost no surprise that she went looking for the same trouble that she had abandoned before. As soon as the Trump case started, the lawyers decided to bring on different witnesses to testify on oath before a judge. After these testimonies, lawyers on the case decided to take on the nitty-gritty detail of phone records, which provided dry listening, trying hard to nail Trump. But his setup is so convoluted that it makes it nigh impossible to figure out. However, during the trial, her name did come up as part of a conspiracy in the case, as she was used as a conduit to ferry checks to him through a very convoluted mail process that was almost impossible for anyone to keep track of. The process was super complicated, hence it was suspicious. For some context, while Donald Trump was living and working in the White House, he was still receiving his mail, which included checks at the Trump Tower in New York, which was suspicious because he now lived in Washington, D.C. How long could it have taken him to change his mail address to the White House? Instead of an address change, he would courier the mail through FedEx to Keith Schiller, who was his bodyguard at the time, who then passed it along to his former assistant, Madeleine, from whom he received the mail. Why go through the whole process to have your mail delivered? As expected, the paper trail not only seemed off to the lawyers, but everyone else who was following the case recognized how suspicious it was to have such a process just to get mail delivered. Suddenly, the case was not looking good for Donald Trump, and he needed a win quickly to chase the hounds back. But just as he schemed and plotted with his lawyer, looking for a way out of this mess, he was caught by surprise when the opposing lawyers brought a new witness. Alas, it was good old Madeleine. Madeleine was invited in 2024 to the stand to talk about her experiences with the then president at the time and tell tales of what she saw. Having been thrown out once on the account of having loose lips, she was unbothered by the consequences. And this time the 34-year-old confidently pointed out that she saw Trump sign checks without reviewing them. While no one can tell yet how bad that might be for Trump's case, Westerhout had finally found her voice again. Whether she progresses into deep politics again is a tale only time can tell. Do you think Donald Trump regrets sending Madeleine away in the first place? How devastating was this testimony for Trump? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.